Hi, my name is Aaron F. Ross, and welcome to this free video tutorial on Texture Paint. We'll be using Maya and Photoshop to texture an object. We'll learn about unwrapping in the UV texture editor in Maya, and then export to a file format that Photoshop can understand. And we'll wrap up by painting in Photoshop in both 2D and 3D modes. This is a fairly high-level tutorial. If you've never done UV layout and unwrapping in Maya before, then I recommend that you check out the Digital Arts Guild video series on the multi-part model. Also, this tutorial builds upon a previous one, which is the Subdivision Surfaces series, once again on Digital Arts Guild. As always, we'll begin by creating a Maya project. Go to the File menu and choose Project Window. I'm currently using the default project. I'll create a new one by clicking New and give it a name. We'll call it Texture Paint Project. I'll create it at the default location, which is in the current user's Maya Projects folder. Click Accept. And now that project has been created. I'm providing a source file on digitalartsguild.com, which is a Maya scene including the model. Download that and then put it into your current project. I'll minimize Maya and then copy that scene file into the current project. I've got it here on my desktop in the Scenes folder. Grab that and copy it. This time I'll right-click and choose Copy. And then drop it into my current project Scenes folder. It's going to be located in the current user's Documents, Maya, Projects, Texture Paint Project, Scenes. Paste that in there. I'm using the right-click menu. That scene file is where it needs to be now. We can go back to Maya. And then load the scene in the File menu. Open Scene. Texture Paint Start. And what we see here is a model that is composed of 3 polygon objects. The fuselage is what I'm going to use to demonstrate the UV layout. So we're only going to be working on that. I'll isolate that from the panel toolbar up here. Isolate Select. And that hides everything else. Now we need to analyze how we're going to cut the object up in order to create a valid UV layout. And there's many ways that we could do it. For example, we could use a cylindrical projection around the main ballistic part of the fuselage here. And then separately map the wings with planar projections. In this case, I'm not going to choose to do that. I'm going to try to keep it simple for the tutorial. So what we'll do is we'll do a simple planar projection from the top and then another one from the bottom. And for this vertical stabilizer back here, we'll do a projection from the side and then from the other side. We'll also then unfold those and make sure that there's no overlap of the UV space. And also in the process, maintain the size of the UVs so that they are proportionally scaled to the polygon faces on the object. This means that a polygon face on the object is going to correspond to a UV face in the UV layout, and it will be proportionally scaled to all of the other UV faces in the layout. And if that is the case, then we can pretty much assume that we'll be able to paint whatever we want onto the surface, either in Maya or in Photoshop or any other program. Once again, my goal here is to make sure that the UV space is proportional to the polygon space and that it unfolds like a piece of cloth that doesn't stretch. If we do it right, then we can use any tool in Photoshop. But if we do stretch that UV space, then, for example, if we try to use the text tool in Photoshop, then we'll have issues where the text will look fuzzy or be stretched or have some other problem. So I know now that I want to do a planar projection from the top and another from the bottom. Probably the easiest way for me to accomplish this is to cut a seam based upon the existing edge loops here and map each one of those areas separately, trying to keep them clean. What I'll do is I'll select the edge loop at the seam here. Let's select the object and then go into Edge component mode. Right-click and choose Edge. dolly in close, and you'll see at the very front or back that I provided an edge there that's going to make it very easy for us to select the edge loop that runs all the way around the object. So just double click on that. Once again, I made it really easy. It's usually not that easy, and you'll usually have to spend some time doing the correct edge loop selection. But now I've got that. And at this point, I can open up the UV texture editor in the polygons menu set. Edit UVs, UV texture editor. And here's our existing UV layout, which looks terrible, of course. Let's turn on the checker display. And this will only work in Viewport 2.0 currently. But now we can see checkers applied onto the surface. If we wanted to, we could do an old school technique where we made a shader with a texture on it that was a checker pattern. But as you can see, we have it built into Maya now. You just have to make sure that you're in Viewport 2.0 as your renderer. We've still got our edge loop selected. Let's go into the UV texture editor and issue a command to separate the UVs along the selected edges. And that's up here on the UV texture editor toolbar, an icon with a scissor. Separate the UVs along the selected edges. Now I've got two separate shells. We can enter shell component mode. Right-click anywhere and choose shell, and click somewhere, and you'll see you're going to select half of the object. I'm just dollying forward and back with the mouse wheel here. So you can see that in the view here as well. It might make it even easier to see if we then turn the checker view off again for a moment. And you can see we're selecting half of the object at a time. Okay, so let's select that shell that corresponds to the top of the object. We can do that in the main view or in the UV texture editor. We can minimize the texture editor for a moment now. When you see the color flashing here, that's pre-selection highlighting. So when I hover my mouse over an already selected shell, it'll highlight in green. And if I hover over an unselected shell, it'll highlight in bright red, but it's not actually selected yet. Okay, so with that top shell selected, you can go into the menus and apply a planar projection from the top down. Create UVs, planar mapping, options. We need to project along the y-axis from the top down. Additionally, we can enable keep image width height ratio. What that means is the projection is going to start out being perfectly square, and that's what we want in this case because the object is roughly square. Click project, and now you'll see a texture manipulator. You can dolly back with Alt right mouse button. We can enter values into the channel box in order to scale that manipulator. The reason I want to enter numerical values is so that I can ensure that these two projections for the top and bottom are scaled exactly the same size. Go to the channel box. I've currently got it hidden. And you will see Polyplanar Project 1 is in the input nodes. And you'll see projection width and projection height. I want to set those to round numbers just to make it easier on myself. Let's set them to 22. So select them both, type in a 22 and press enter. If you lose that selection, let's say you click on something else and you lose that, you can always go back to it by selecting the object, and then back in the input nodes you'll see Polyplanar Projection 1. Now we'll do the second one. I want to select the shell on the bottom. And I can click that in the 3D view, and you'll see the bottom polygon faces are selected. And do another projection. Create UVs, planar mapping options. Use the same settings. Click project. And also set its projection width and height to 22. And finally, we need to project from the bottom here, not from the top. So we need to rotate this projection. We can do that numerically or interactively. To do it interactively, we want to select this red corner on that manipulator. Select that, and what happens is it turns into a different style of manipulator. And that's a more familiar one that looks like the standard move and scale tools. To get to the rotation manipulator, click on this big blue circle. Don't click and drag on it, just click once. And now you'll have a standard rotation tool. We want to rotate, in this case, around the y-axis of this manipulator itself. So you'll see the green circle here. Click on that green circle and also hold down the J key while you do it, and that'll turn on discrete rotations. So the manipulator will rotate in increments. Hold down J, click on that green circle, and turn the manipulator 180 degrees around. And it might be a little tricky. You need to drag up and down in order to rotate it. And you'll see over in the channel box that rotate Z is changing. So when that hits 180, then I can release the mouse. And here it is. Rotate Z is negative 180. Now it's projecting from the other direction. Let's look at our layout at this point. Open that up. And I've still got the bottom shell selected. And I can go ahead and move that here. I can use the standard move tool if I want. It actually accomplishes the same thing. And you can see that I've got a top projection and a bottom projection. That's a good place for us to save our first version out. Go to the File menu, Save Scene As, and in order to set this up for increment and save, I'll save it out as texturepaint.0001.ma.